Imagine one of your competitors calls you from an unknown number out of the blue and tells you, and this is all down to something that you've posted on LinkedIn. Today on Amplifying Recruitment, I'm joined by Alex Westworth. Alex is the CEO of Now Education, and he's become somewhat famous for his LinkedIn activity, but it goes way beyond just winding up his competitors. His LinkedIn activity helps the wider market, it educates consultants within the education space, and it feeds their business. In today's conversation, we talk about Alex's presence on LinkedIn, his personal brand as a leader. We talk about education recruitment, the wider industry, and lots more. Alex, welcome to Amplifying Recruitment.
Thank you very much.
For anyone that doesn't know you, could you do like a 30-second intro?
I'm Alex Westworth. I'm the CEO of Now Education Group. I'm a former teacher turned education recruitment consultant. I've been working in the education recruitment space since 2010, where I started off as a secondary consultant for Now Education. And I've grown my desk and subsequently grown my business since then. Since 2024, January 24, I became the CEO and majority shareholder of Now Education Group.
That's quite a journey, that. It's an unusual journey, right? To go from, I suppose, going from industry or going from teaching into education recruitment, maybe not that unusual, but to go from teacher to education recruitment to now CEO of the business, that's unusual. How did that, and in like quite a rapid rise there?
Yeah, so I started off, before I even became a teacher, when I left university, my first job was working for a company called Barber Index, and it was my first job out of university. And at the time, I was actually living in Burnham, and they were based in Windsor. And at the time, I was living in a house share, as you do, because down in Burnham, even back in 2002, it was very, very expensive, and all you could afford was a room in a house with 5 other people who I didn't know, obviously, at the beginning. I was living with a guy who was a teacher of maths at the local grammar school, Burnham Grammar School, and I was a bit disillusioned with my job, didn't really like it, and got to know him very well. And he introduced me to the world of teaching. And I went over to the school and I met with the, I can't remember his name now, but I met with the head of business studies, because I said to him, I'm interested in going back to university and retraining as a teacher. And I just met him, spent some time with him, with the kids. And I thought, you know what, this is the career for me. I studied business and economics at university. I love my subject. And the idea of teaching it and seeing a very clear career progression, loads of variety, all that good stuff, I looked at it and I thought, no, this is for me. So I went to train as a teacher, and I got my first job I interviewed for, and I was the only person interviewing for it. And the reason why is because half of the curriculum for GCSE and A-level was economics, and I was the only person in the cohort of people training to be teachers that could actually confidently and wanted to teach economics, certainly up to A-level. So I got the job, and I taught business and economics until December 2007. And just before I left, I'd met a chap called Gary Redman. Now, Gary Redman at the time was the client of my girlfriend at the time, no longer my girlfriend, who was a personal trainer. Right. And he had, at the time, 2 young children, one doing GCSE maths and one doing business A-level, and he needed a tutor. And he was just casually talking to Caroline, whilst no doubt she was beasting him in the gym, about how he needed a tutor for his kids. And she was like, well, my boyfriend's a teacher. Now, he lived in Princeton, near Leamington Spa, and I was living at the time in a town called Aldridge, just outside Walsall. And it's about a good hour drive apart. And Caroline was like, I think you should tutor this guy's kids. I think there's a great opportunity there, because he's in recruitment, owns a business. You might get on really well with him. I thought, okay. So anyway, cut a long story short, I met Gary, started tutoring his kids. We got on like a house on fire. I really helped his kids get much better grades than they were initially predicted, which I think impressed Gary massively. But when I got to his house the first time, I won't forget it. He's got this barn conversion, and he's there. He'd probably kill me for saying this, but he's got a black Ferrari outside. And I looked at it, and I was driving a Renault Clio. And I looked at it and I thought, how can I buy a Ferrari on a teacher's salary? And obviously I was doing a bit of maths and I still couldn't make it work. So I was like, how do I get that sort of thing? So I get to know Gary and what he does. But Gary at the time had an idea to open a business. This is back in mid 2007. He was thinking about opening up a business to piggyback off his other business, Madison, which was an umbrella payroll company. And he wanted to set up a factoring company to basically support the cash flow of small to medium-sized recruitment companies in any sector. But Madison's client base was predominantly like construction, driving, logistics, that sort of thing, industrial. And obviously me being a business and economics teacher, no industrial background really to speak of, but loads of enthusiasm and energy and really wanted to just sort of progress myself. And financially, I wanted the nicer things. And at the time I was 27 years old. And he sat me down and he said, Alex, I've got a job opportunity for you. I want you to do, I'm thinking about setting up this financing business, financing the cash flow of a small to medium-sized recruitment businesses. I'm like, yep, sign me up. Didn't even think about it. Just said, yep. Because I could see he was a very successful entrepreneur. And if I'm going to actually, progress and get the things I want in the time frame I want, then maybe this is the opportunity that I can't say no to. So I joined in January 2008, and within, well, if you remember,
yep, I remember.
July, August 2008 was when the economic sky came falling down, and it became very difficult because obviously as a factoring company, we were having to essentially white label, borrow money from a clearing bank, a large bank, to basically generate the funds required to then lend it on again to the SME businesses through factoring services. But I think at the time we were in a conversation with a French bank trying to get £5 million worth of funding facility. Well, that kind of dried up, that opportunity, with the credit crunch. And the subsequent economic collapse of the world economy. So Gary's recruitment business, which at that time was predominantly construction, was facing a real challenge because the construction sector was really struggling as well. And Gary pivoted me very quickly from this role into working for Now Recruitment and in a commercial manager role, helping him with restructuring the business, getting better at analyzing data, unfortunately making some redundancies, closing offices and all that sort of stuff, which I'm sure many agencies were involved with at the time. So I did that for a period of time. And then in the end of December 2009, beginning of January, at the time he had an education recruitment business that had 3 people. And the manager of the business called Gary out of the blue and just said, look, personal reasons, I've got to go back to South Africa where I'm from for family reasons. And Gary was left with 2 people and, for his education division. He turned to me. He says, why don't you do it? Why don't you take on this business unit, manage it for me and take on a desk? I said, I don't know anything about being a recruitment consultant. I'm not a salesperson. But then he said, well, yeah, but you know teachers, you know schools, you can speak the language. So I think you'd be great at it. And he was right. Not saying I was great at it, but he was right. I took to it quite quickly. And so I set up a secondary desk with my 2 colleagues at the time, and we quite quickly grew the business. He could see that my approach to education recruitment, which was all based, candidate, focus on building your availability, sell it out to schools. And because I could speak the language of teacher and I could go in, I was very credible in front of a head teacher, business manager, or in front of a candidate, then I managed to build my availability quite quickly, build my client base and build my days. And we're talking in 2010, which was a very tough market, very different. The education market then was very different to the way it was now. I'm sure you know it was much more school led, and there was less of a candidate shortage than there is today, particularly for qualified teachers. And off the back of the economic collapse, there's a lot of people working in the private sector retraining as teachers. Yeah. And I think at the time Gordon Brown was pushing, the Labour Prime Minister at the time was pushing for increasing employment in the public sector to stabilise the job market. And you had a lot of, I remember, recruiting engineers and so forth to be science and maths teachers. So there was a lot of teachers coming, industrially experienced people coming into the market, qualified as teachers, as well as a lot of people going into train as teachers straight out of university or junior university, because the private sector job market was pretty bleak, wasn't it? So it was a tougher market in that respect, but it was still about the relationships you had with the schools and the candidates, and just my whole approach to recruitment was different to the typical recruiter at the time. And I remember there was and stop me if I'm rambling, but I remember Gary had a trainer at the time. And I just remember, and quite arrogantly, I'm not saying this was right, and I know you're in training, so please don't take offense. But I was sat there going, I don't need to listen to any of this. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do it completely differently. I'm not going to follow this sales process. I'm not going to follow this. I'm not going to take any of your advice. I know what I'm doing. I'm a teacher. I'm going to be a great education recruitment consultant. And no doubt that probably didn't help me, because I could probably done better quicker.
I think it's an interesting thing, that, because I think I see this a lot, where you have people that are just complete mavericks, and it will go one way or another, where they'll absolutely go, do you know what, I've just believed that this is the way to do it, and they'll win, or it catastrophically fails. You're obviously in the former camp, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back, the training that she was giving was actually very good. I, in my headstrong arrogance at the time, thought, no, I'm going to do it my way. So I took the team and I just scrapped the idea of, sales call targets and registration targets and visits targets and things like that. It was all about, no, we're going to focus on building our availability and selling that availability out to existing schools and lap schools. And we're going to sell off the basis we're going to sell the product we've got, because, schools aren't the same as construction companies. If I've got a great quantity surveyor, I might be able to upsell them and get them into a main contract business who may not even be hiring one, but this person may actually really support their. But schools don't tend to hire additional staff if they don't need them. They hire when they need them, whether they've got a vacancy or they've got short-term cover need. And they don't overhire deliberately or take on more staff than they need for their timetable. So I kind of pivoted it differently, and I was like, I'm just going to focus on be a product-led sell. Anyway, so that got me through the first few years and growing and I think after after 2 years, this is a long time ago, but I was up to around 100, 150 days peak. And I think that was quite a rapid growth for someone who'd started out with nothing and never done anything.
Just for anyone that's listening that isn't in education.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was going to say that's quite an esoteric thing to say.
What would that be, like 20 grand a month?
Yeah, so at the time, I think we were operating around 45, 50 pound a day margin. So we're talking anything between £5,000 and £6,500, £7,000. So yeah, 3.5 weeks, so 20 to 20, depending on my peak months. Sorry, it could have been like 24 to 25.
Which is decent in any market.
Yeah, and if you adjust it for inflation, then back to now, it's probably well over 30 grand. So got to remember that. You've got to adjust for inflation. So yeah, it was good. But the market was very different then. It was far few competitors. There wasn't any frameworks. There was none of these tech companies. And we'll talk about that no doubt later. But there's a very different market then, with, in terms of the candidate side and the client side, but also the competitive nature of the market and the way it was structured and the sort of the way you got into schools. Certainly there's far fewer academy trusts then and far fewer schools part of them, all that good stuff. So, and then I think what happened, a key thing that changed my mindset and the growth of the company was when back in 2011, 2012, Gary sat me down, another gentleman who was working in the business, and offered us an equity opportunity, because he could see that education recruitment, against the backdrop of what was going on in his construction business, had the opportunity to fly. But he needed to incentivize us to, because probably the last thing he's thinking is, God, I don't want these guys to leave and set up by themselves, sort of thing. Or if the construction business completely collapses, it will take the education business with it, because it was all part of one company, which was then branded at the time as Now Recruitment, and subsequently has now become Now Careers. So we opened up Now Education Limited and created a separate limited company, and we became our business partner at the time became minority shareholders in that business. And Gary gave us EBITDA, earnings before interest and so forth, basically a profit target to increase our equity. So we started off with 5%. And the target was to get to £500,000 EBIT, and he'll give us 20% each, and thus diluting himself. We got there in 2 years from around 200,000 at the time. Because it was an equity target. It wasn't a time target. It was an equity target. An EBIT target to get to a level of equity.
Yeah.
So I was like, how do we get there as fast as possible? And it also meant that we obviously I don't want to name names in this interview just in case so I'll just talk about people.
Yeah,
and if anyone wants to do their own research, and they could probably work, connect the dots. But we headhunted after within about a year and a half of opening up Now Education Limited and becoming shareholders. We headhunted a really strong, credible biller in the Birmingham primary market, and we offer what we did. We diluted our own equity to entice him over from his role at his current employer. And once we brought him over, then things started to snowball. And what we did as a business, rather than growing and bringing on new people and training, like inexperienced people and training them, we went deliberately out to headhunt experienced staff and offer what we thought was, the best offer for the best billers in the market. But we're talking about Birmingham, the Black Country here. So we really sort of changed our commission scheme. So our commission scheme now Education was different to the rest of Gary's businesses and now careers. We got rid of thresholds. We started everything at 15%. We upped our holiday allowance from what was, I think, 25 at the time to 35. We changed our working hours during the summer holidays to make it more in line.
To attract the best people.
Yeah, to make it more in line in some respects with the rest. Because, standalone education recruitment businesses even then had more holidays and, reduced working hours during the summer. So we tweaked that, but also really ramped up our commission. And we attracted people that may have been like heavily micromanaged with KPIs. And we said, no, there's none of that. We'll give you the database, we'll give you the tools, the support, the incentive, the platform. Just go out and build your desk the way you see fit, with guidance from myself and others in the business.
And at this time, have you own 20% of the business?
But yeah. But it became 14 when we hired this other guy.
Right. Okay.
So rather than two of us having 20% each, we agreed to dilute it down to three of us having 14%.
And it sounds like you've got high levels of autonomy here. Or is Gary still involved? Are you running things past him?
Absolutely. Obviously, Gary at the time, and up until December 23, he was the CEO, and ultimately the buck stopped with him. So yeah. But Gary and I always had a very good working relationship, and we come at things in a different way, but we always tend to get to the same conclusion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's the odd time that we'd have a bit of an argument, etc. No doubt. But fundamentally, we work together very well. And we've got different thinking styles and approaches to people and business, and the two complemented each other very well. And Gary trusted me to just go out and headhunt people, run the business as and the numbers spoke for themselves. When there was just the three of us, we were doing 30 grand a week. An average of £10,000 per desk. Then we added more people to the business. And to this day, our average margin per week per consultant is depending on the time of year, anywhere between £6,500 and £8,000 a week per consultant. I'm a very big believer in driving people to have high average weekly margin rather than a long tail of consultants all billing sort of £2,000 to £4,000 a week. Yeah. I'd rather have fewer billing, producing more. I'm not saying that's the perfect way of doing it, but that's just the way we built our business. That was the culture and approach to structuring the business that we found successful and endured all this time. But Gary, to go back to your question, Gary very much allowed me to get on and just run the business. But obviously hiring decisions or spending decisions on extra marketing or anything like that, obviously anything would go past him. And
then eventually you've got to the point where he's exited the business.
Yes.
And you've acquired the business as the CEO.
Yeah. Well, obviously, as you know, back in 2018, we decided that we wanted to grow the business beyond Birmingham and the Black Country. So up to 2018, the Birmingham office had consultants supplying primary, secondary, SEND into predominantly Birmingham, Black Country, but we also had Leicester as well. We had a secondary consultant doing Leicester. And we wanted to expand the business beyond the East and the West Midlands, tackle Nottingham and Derbyshire and South Wales with Cardiff and all other parts of the country. But we saw that we didn't want to have a model like, say, for argument's sake, Teacher Active, where you've got a head office in Birmingham and then all the other smaller offices around the country that are centrally controlled and owned by the central team in Birmingham. we wanted to incentivize people, like Gary had done with me back in 2012. We wanted to incentivize people already working in the market, already credible, already very good, well-networked, successful, proven billers, working in with other proven successful billers. We wanted to incentivize a small team of people in that area that we wanted to target, the right people, obviously, with equity. So we set up what we call our shared equity model. So by the end of 2019, we'd opened up a Cardiff office and a Nottingham office, and the way it works is very simply is that we would open up the office as a brand new business, which has 75% ownership and therefore control by Now Education Group, and 25% ownership for the founding shareholders that joined us from whichever agency they've joined us from. And it's very much about the right people and the right region joining the business to help it grow and give them the opportunity to be able to, take ownership and take an element of control of that business and work with us to help them grow a business in their region. And we would fully fund it, fully support it, give it all the back office support it needs, align the incentives obviously across the business, and if they grow their business and grow their equity value, the whole group equity value is growing. And that's how it worked. So we opened up Cardiff in November 2019. We opened up Nottingham in January 2020. And then, as you no doubt know, a few months later, the world stopped due to COVID. And we had all these people we'd hired, and they'd only been trading for a few months, and we had to stop everything and furlough everyone. And it was a real, for Gary, I think it was he's 11 years older than I am, I think. And also back in November 2021, he had open heart surgery. And after the back of that, in the summer of 2022, after all the stress of COVID, after all the sort of recovery from his surgery, off the back of that, he sat me down and said, I want to step aside and give you the opportunity to take control of the business and or find somebody to acquire it to help it grow to the next level. And we went through a process. Eventually, we ended up with a debt-backed deal through Pref Equity, where effectively they effectively lent the business the money to buy out Gary, and I became CEO, and that's where we are today.
Amazing. It's quite a journey, isn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't planned.
Yeah, I don't think you could plan that.
No, we couldn't. And then the best journeys probably aren't planned, I guess.
Yeah,
like the best nights out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it was a journey. It's an incredible journey.
Yeah.
So
okay,
I've lost a lot of hair since.
You said they're the best, not planned. Is your LinkedIn activity planned? I'd love to talk about your LinkedIn.
Is it planned?
Yeah. Is it like?
Yeah, it is now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't want to say your LinkedIn. Would it be fair to say it's controversial? Some of the stuff that you post.
No doubt.
Provocative, maybe.
I want it to be provocative. I want it to be. I see a lot of people post on LinkedIn about encouraging people to produce content that's informative, that's engaging, that's going to add value to your audience. And I'm a massive believer in that. And it all started back in, I think it was 2023. And I was on holiday in Croatia, and I was reading through, as you do, teaching personnel's latest accounts.
On holiday.
Yeah, on holiday. They'd just been published, and I was like, yeah, this is exciting stuff. For me, it was anyway. And no doubt, teaching personnel's bored. I was thinking to myself, I think I'd already done some posts, but quite sporadically. And I was thinking to myself, I'd really like to do something about a competitor and discuss their numbers and sort of give my view on something that's publicly available. Because obviously, coming from the fact that I was a business and economics teacher, teaching how to read accounts was part of what I used to teach both GCSE and A-level. But beyond that, growing and running an education recruitment business and understanding the numbers and what influences them and things like that, I was like, I want to talk about these numbers and sort of help people understand just how profitable education agencies are, but actually, what goes into generating the services that we provide, that we're not all gouging huge amounts of profit from the charge rates that we charge schools. But I also wanted to do something a little controversial and sort of poke the biggest bear in the market that's got like 10, 12% market share. And that's where it came. And I remember coming back on holiday and taking a walk in the park on a nice sunny day with a bit of a tan and doing the video. And it kind of blew up from there. that got a lot of response, that video, and a lot of engagement, and a lot of people actually reached out to me about it, either working at or previously working at TP and Protocol. And I thought, I'm onto something here, talking about the market, talking about competitors, talking about the numbers, being open and transparent about how, so then it evolved into talking about the market spend and using the data available on the government website. So I thought to myself, and I figured that it's about consistency, isn't it? I thought, if I just did it sporadically without any kind of structure, I don't think it would have caught on. And I got into the habit of doing a video on a Sunday or a Saturday, walking the dogs in the park, and then writing my content that Sunday afternoon. And after thinking about what I wanted to write, and then posting it on Monday morning. And I started to drop the videos every Monday morning, sort of 8:30 till 9 o'clock, when I knew that education recruitment consultants had finished their morning cover. They're probably off to make a coffee, get some breakfast, get on their phones, fire up their laptops or whatever, go onto LinkedIn, and then my video just pops in onto their feed, and they, oh, what's he ranting on about now, sort of thing. So that's how it evolved. I never intended to be controversial, not all the time, but the controversial posts do tend to get the most traction.
Yeah,
particularly if I'm talking about a competitor.
What is the what was the intention? Is it so often, like when I speak to, and actually I think as a generalization, I don't think enough CEOs, founders, business leaders produce video content. And so is the intention there to win business and feed the consultants? Is it to attract consultants into the business? Is it just to poke the bear?
Bit of everything, really. Ultimately, it's there to develop the personal brand of Alex Westworth, CEO of Now Education, but also Now Education, the brand of Now Education. I want to raise the profile of the business. I want to, going back to how we grew in the past, we're very good at hiring experienced consultants who have got bags of potential to bill even more, but wherever they're at limits them, whether that's because there's a team commission, or they have their desks broken up deliberately to give to new people, or the commission scheme itself it's not particularly great for the biggest billers. So we've had great success, not 100% success rate, but we've had good success, great success, attracting experienced talent. But obviously, as we're growing into new regions, east of England, the Northwest, South Wales, West Yorkshire, etc., I need to be able to reach more consultants. And I'm based in the Midlands. So LinkedIn was a great way. If I start putting out regular content that adds value, that gets the interest of the market, that helps educate consultants as well. And there's both that I've done, which, in fact, I remember interviewing somebody, he said, why do you do some of the posts you do? Because I'm sat there writing down what you say, taking it on board as great advice or training or coaching, and then implementing that into my business.
Yeah.
Aren't you helping the competition? I said, well, yes, I am helping the competition, but one day you may join me, and if I'm helping you today, you may decide one day when you're looking to leave that I'd like to join Now Education, because that, I remember back then, Alex posted something on LinkedIn that I found very useful. So it's about promoting me as a person, to get my reach out there to other regions, particularly that I want to grow and expand Now Education in, and obviously promote the brand and raise its profile. A lot of the audience I have, I've made a conscious decision to connect with a lot of school leaders as well, whether it be teachers or head teachers or leaders of multi-academy trust, because I want that content to go out to them as well. I want them to see a CEO of an education recruitment business talking about the education recruitment market as a collection of profitable businesses delivering a vital, flexible service to schools that helps them to function, without which they probably couldn't function, and give them some insight into the market that they may not be aware of. They may choose to ignore it, but they may find it interesting. So if they see that Now Education is one of the agencies that their schools use, they go, oh, that's the guy from LinkedIn. Yeah. It's all connected, and obviously be controversial, because everyone likes a bit of controversy. It attracts interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever had any backlash from anything that you've posted?
Once. So I did a post about a company, and then about 2 days later, I got an unknown phone call, and this gentleman on the phone said, "You're a C word. You're a C word." And I was like, I can't say C word, obviously. I was like, excuse me, because you're effing stuff on LinkedIn. Why don't you mind your own business? And then put the phone down.
But you know who it is.
Well, the timing's a bit odd, given that it was 2 days after the post of that particular company I did, where I said some nice things about them, but I also was talking about something which I didn't agree with about the way that they presented information. And that then got I don't know, I can't prove it, because obviously it was an unknown number and I don't know the voice of this person, but it felt like it was from that person. I mean, it may not be. It may just be a complete coincidence. It might just be somebody else I just pissed off months ago, you know?
Yeah.
But generally speaking, no. I mean, sometimes I've actually met some CEOs and who welcome me to talk about their business. They want me to, because I don't go out there and deliberately slag them off and call them, you know, useless or anything. I don't say that. I just give an insight into the numbers.
Has anyone corrected you and gone, actually, you're completely wrong? You said that
No.
because, oh, right, okay. So your analysis has been pretty accurate.
Either that or they daren't, just in case, because they don't want to put their head above the parapet.
Yeah.
And have me, you know, come back at them. So I might have been wrong or got something, you know, slightly incorrect. But I tend to focus on the analysis I know I can do with the numbers I've got. And then if I'm making assumptions, make my assumptions clear. So it's very difficult to correct that, because you can't go, well, you're wrong. Well, I'm making an assumption based on X, Y, Z. I'm simplifying it for the purpose of the post, but also to demonstrate an idea or a concept that I'm getting across. And I'm making my assumptions clear. If I'm wrong, then tell me I'm wrong. Yeah. No one has yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
Have you posted anything that you regretted?
Stuff that doesn't do very well.
Oh, right. So nothing you've posted and gone, oh, you know, actually in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done that.
No. You know, the stuff that I've wanted to post and then decided it's probably a bad idea to do it, so I just don't post it.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you know, there's a limit, there's a line that I don't want to cross. Because at the end of the day, I want to come across as fundamentally likable, credible, and someone that people want to listen to. If you take it too far in the negative direction, then I think you just kind of lose. Again, you lose that credibility. You want people to gravitate towards the content and keep coming back to it. You don't want to start, oh, there's that guy that just rants and just talks a lot of nonsense, or he says he's not particularly kind or nice about his competition. We don't want to be associated with that. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. The credibility thing's really important, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, hugely. At the end of the day, you know, one of the great things about education recruitment is that education recruiters, they're very good at coming together against, you know, the collective challenges that they face, or sharing ideas. Obviously not sharing commercial information. Fundamentally, they are competitors and they'll headhunt from each other and compete for days. And, you know, we play in a zero-sum game, don't we? Because every day we fill is a day that the agency that we compete against can't fill. So it's a zero-sum game in that respect. But there is, you know, through forums and groups like AppSco, for example, there's a really a sense of camaraderie, particularly helping each other do things like safeguarding better, because that helps us all, because that protects the industry. So I don't want to be ostracized or be an outlier in the market that's seen as a sort of a demon in the market. I don't want, because it's important to be part of that supportive collective group.
You said something a second ago about your clients seeing the CEO of a business, and we kind of spoke about this when we were just walking up to the studio. We're talking about we didn't call it this, but I suppose it's like corporate anonymity, maybe, of you don't see any of the guys that are CEOs of similar sized businesses to yours, whether they're in education or in any other sector. Very few of them are doing some of the personal branding type stuff that you're doing.
That's right. You just don't. You might see the odd post on LinkedIn where they might like somebody else's post or something like that, but you don't see regular content going out there talking about themselves or their competition or their view on the market. And I don't know why that is. And that's something that I wanted to, as a sort of trend, or I wanted to break, or do something different. I think that's probably what's helped me in a lot of the ways, because I stand out in a good way. Obviously I haven't always been the CEO of Now Education. I've only been the CEO of Now Education since, January 24. And when I started doing this, I was the MD, minority shareholder. And for me, it was about being able to show that somebody who's grown a business and is continuing to grow a business, an education recruitment business, go out there and talk about what they do, talk about the market. I mean, I think they should. I think they should talk about the market. I think they should talk about their business. I think they should give their view on where the education market is going. And I think they should be helping the wider market, the consultants out there, and particularly the smaller businesses that are run, that are owner-led, teams of 2 to 5. These are people that they don't really compete with the likes of Teacher Active or Tradewind. So it would be great, wouldn't it, if their CEOs and CFOs, et cetera, could get out there and do more engaging content, because they're going to help a business that's not a real threat to them in the grand scheme of things. But the way I look at it is, if I can help the owner of a small recruitment business or a consultant within a business, whether it's small, medium, and large, if they do education recruitment better for their candidate, for their school, for their team around them, surely then that's positive for the market, because we're all doing a better job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think there's lots of people that would say something similar but not really mean that. They'd go, I want everyone to do better, and we all do well when we all do well. But I think secretly inside thinking, do you know what?
You're right.
I would kill you if given the opportunity. That doesn't.
I absolutely. And I don't see why. The thing about the education recruitment market, again, is it's absolutely huge, yet it's actually really small. And what I mean by that is, from our point of view, if you look at the spend data historically between 2012 and 2019, the market, and I've said this before on LinkedIn, the market sort of swung between 900 million and 1.1, 1.2 billion. It's about an average of just over £1 billion a year spend, which £1 billion is a lot of money, but it's not in terms of education, overall education budget, and it's a drop in the ocean in terms of government spending. Yeah. But to us, it's a huge market to grow into.
Yeah.
I mean, the market at its peak post-COVID was around 1.6 billion. Okay. Even if it dropped by 20%, which I think it has done the last, I could be wrong, but my instincts tell me that the market overall sort of dropped by about 20%, partly because a lot of catch-up funding for tuition has exited the market now. But anyway, even though the market's taking a dip, there's still a huge market to grow into. You can be a 30 million turnover business, and there's still a huge amount of market to double that turnover and still only have a small percentage of the overall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, mate, yeah.
So the market's very, very big for us to grow into. So it's helping other agencies that are small and you're even a similar size to you probably won't make much difference to your overall growth strategy. But if it does help raise the quality of education recruitment, that's only good for the reputation of agencies. It's like that free rider benefit. You'll benefit from the fact that schools are having a positive experience with all agencies they work with. If they're having a shit experience with other agencies, or crap experience, shall I say, not very good experience over here, they might tarnish you with the same brush if you're trying to get into that school. Does that make sense?
It makes loads of sense. I think that happens across like the amount of people, whether they're a school, an engineering consultancy, a law firm, that have had a shit experience with a recruiter. There'll be a hell of a lot of those, right? And
yeah. But that's because there's so many education recruitment businesses, there's so many recruitment businesses. That will happen. You can't just have a great experience. But if people that like myself, or the CEOs, leaders of these bigger businesses that have grown these big businesses, that have got so much experience and wisdom to offer it. Don't give away your trade secrets. Don't give them all the information that's going to put you at a competitive disadvantage. But it's only it can only be an advantage to your brand and your reputation as an agency if you can help others do better in terms of their own practice. That's my view on it. Maybe that's a bit hairy fairy woo woo, but I believe that.
Does it? And the last question, I suppose, on this really. Does it feed the business? Do you think the CEO being out there, having a strong personal brand, being somewhat outspoken, that attracts business in for your consultants?
I can't say. It's attracted consultants to the business, which therefore has brought business into the business through schools and candidates joining the agency and working with the agency. That's for sure. Certainly hasn't detracted from the business in terms of it hasn't destroyed our reputation or harmed our reputation, or no one's left because I've been walking my dog in the park and ranting about a competitor or anything like that. But it's very difficult to know if it's it's very difficult to know if there's a direct correlation between what I've done and revenue coming in. There's no way I can measure the ROI of it, but I don't do it to measure the ROI of it. So the return
I suppose it'd be one of those things I would imagine that consultant contacts a school, does their pitch, and they go, "Oh, Now Education, that's the dog walking guy that does the ranting."
Funny you say that. A consultant had that happen to them. I'm sure it was one of our Nottingham team that they I love that guy's videos. He makes me laugh.
Yeah. So that has, isn't it? It's helped them get a foot in the door, or So yes, I do. Yes, but that's one example. But I couldn't tell you. But I don't do it to see a direct result and measure an ROI or anything like that, because it's virtually impossible. I know that it's not. I know it's a good thing that I'm doing. I know that people like it. I know that people engage with it. I get likes. I get comments. I get loads of impressions. So, I'm a bit of a laggard when it comes to social media and things like that. In terms of, but I know that if the more likes you get, the more impressions you get, the more engagement you get, then that's a good thing, right? Yeah.
It can only be a good thing. And I haven't been cancelled yet or arrested, so I must be doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a second ago I just want to talk about the education market for a second, because there's been some big shifts. There's certainly been some, I've worked in education recruitment 6 or 7 years ago, and I still work with clients that do 1.6 billion spend back down to $1 billion. That feels to me like that's a massive drop.
Yeah, I don't think it's dropped back down to $1 billion, but I think it's heading in that direction. I think the market is correcting itself.
And then what happens to all the businesses in there?
Well, it's interesting.
And the consultants.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because, and I'm going to put a post out there next week. I've been doing some analysis on the top 12 brands out there that are purely education-focused businesses. So those that produce full accounts that go back as far as 2016. So I've looked from 2016 to 2024. In some instances, 2023. But I've got 7 to 8 years of 12 companies, overlapping that with supply spend. Okay. And so obviously I can't look at businesses like Hayes Education or Reed Education, because their education numbers are buried in their sort of consolidated account. So unfortunately, unless the MD of Reed and Hayes want to share their numbers with me, I can't add them to the analysis. But I'm pretty sure I'll get the same result. And what's really interesting is that over the last, and by the time this podcast goes out, I'll put the post out there, so I'm not sort of ruining my own post. But what's really interesting is that between 2016 and 2023, 2024, well, certainly between 2016 and 2019, the supply spend was broadly flat but slightly in decline, okay, before the pandemic. And most of all these agencies, in fact, apart from education, saw their own billings, revenue margin, but also critically productivity per consultant, average margin per consultant per year. That was broadly flat and hovered around £98,000 to £100,000 per consultant per year. It then shot up as the market, like the spend shot up to a peak of 1.6 billion. It shot up 38%. If you take the consolidation of all these 12 brands, okay, the average biller was producing 38% more at the peak than they were in the 4 years before COVID. But it's then in 2024, it's starting to take a dip. It's really what I think's happened here is that as the spend has gone up, why does an industry grow? Because, well, one reason might be because there's more demand for the product, more companies go into the enter the market to compete away the growth in profitability. Just for, simple economics 101. That doesn't necessarily happen in education recruitment, because the market didn't grow because there was more pupils in more schools and therefore they needed more teachers. The same number of schools, there's still 22,000 schools. The market grew because there was a huge demand for short-term, medium-term cover due to the pandemic, coupled with a lot of, a sustained teacher shortage, coupled with a huge amount of need for catch-up funding and support post-COVID. And there was £1 billion additional revenue money put into the market for the tuition services, but I believe a large chunk of that just went into schools and was just spent on supply.
Yeah.
So there was more money injected into I could be wrong on that, but there's more money injected into the market, more funding going into schools. There's more demand for supply services. Therefore, spend on agencies goes up, but productivity per consultant also goes up. Also, more agencies enter the market. You've got people setting up by themselves. They fragment to their own. Well, we did it. We entered in that period of time. We entered the Northwest. We entered Leeds. We entered Lincoln. We'd already entered Cardiff and the South Wales and Nottingham, Derbyshire markets. We even entered the London market. So we were entering the market and we were taking talent from existing established agencies and making them our own. But there were also people setting up their own businesses. There were agencies opening up new offices like we were. So the overall supply of consultants grew. You can see that. The average headcount of these businesses, which make up about 35% of the entire market, they were increasing their consultant headcount as well as other agencies popping up in the market. But as the spend goes down, it's a good question because they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle to maintain the level of the rate of growth that they've seen over the last 4 years. And you'll probably see agencies starting to exit the market, and or exit regions. You'll see offices close, and the market will normalize itself back to where it was. And look, if you go forward, to 2030, we know that we're going to see increased academization, more schools, if not all schools, part of a multi-category trust. We've got falling pupil numbers, particularly with primary schools, which will change the demand and the nature of how schools use agencies. I've posted about that before. And I think what will happen is spend will normalize back, will trend towards the previous average pre-COVID. Think about the education recruitment market. Again, it's absolutely huge, yet it's actually really small. What I mean by that is,
how do you prepare for that as a business?
Well, you just got to keep looking ahead. You got to keep doing.
Because you're looking, just what you mentioned there, like you said, thinking ahead to 2030.
That's what I'm already thinking about.
I don't think enough business owners, whether they're in education, whether they're in recruitment, I think business generally, I don't think enough people look 5 years ahead and think, what does that hold? I know some of it, we just don't know. No,
we don't. But you can make an educated guess, and you can look at what's going on in the market and extrapolate out. I mean, don't forget, we're now backed by a private debt fund, on a 5-year time horizon, which the deal matures in November 2028. At that point, we've got to look for another capital event, whatever. But so we've got to be looking ahead. You have to look ahead in our respect. We don't just do it because of that. We would always think that way anyway as a business. But you've got to plan ahead 5 years in advance, and particularly with what's going on in our market, with the increased level of academization, falling pupil numbers, high levels of competition, increased use of frameworks, new entrants of tech businesses like Zen and Humley who are coming into the market and trying to disrupt things and shake things up, increased use of master vendors, MSPs, managed service platforms, and things like that.
There's falling teacher numbers as well, isn't there?
Yeah,
is that a thing?
Yeah. Well, there's fewer people entering the market to train as the teacher labor market. There's more people exiting. Agencies are seeing more and more agencies are seeing support staff being a greater percentage of their overall candidate mix. But there has been and still continues to be high demand for special needs TAs, for example, even in mainstream schools, as schools internalize the provision of SEND. So the nature of desks are changing. That you've got to be able to prepare for all that. If you look at it, and I posted about this. If you've got a large national recruitment business and you're looking at how much of your revenue is coming from primary, my question mark will be, what's going to happen in the next 5 years as pupil numbers drop? Because secondary numbers aren't going to drop. They might by certainly over the next 5 years. That'll be next. Because the decline in pupil numbers in primary will then create a decline in the secondary numbers. So you've got to plan, but that's 10-year time horizon. That's probably too far to plan because there's just so many unknowns. But you got to look at that and go, well, how's that going to affect our primary revenue, and how will that affect the mix? So we should be focused more on developing secondary and SEND. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And how do we train our primary consultants to pivot and adapt and evolve their offerings so they maintain the level of productivity and or can grow in a challenging declining market, which is probably may decline faster than the secondary and SEND market. There's still definitely going to be a need for recruitment in the primary sector, but the way that primary schools work with consultants will probably change more to candidates may switch between booking to, more frequently and more short to medium term bookings. Schools may even prefer to use supply because the cost of supply teachers, if you don't need as many teachers, it's probably cheaper to have them on supply and engage with them on an arm's length basis through an agency rather than employ them directly. Yeah. So it could be a benefit, but it's being able to sell that to the schools. There's some free advice for you.
What do you think the next 12 months hold? Maybe not even just for education, but for the recruitment industry in general. What do you think the next 12 months looks like?
Certainly within the context of the economy we're in.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I only work in my own little small slither of the recruitment market, the education recruitment market. So I'm no expert. I can't talk to the wider recruitment market, but just to give, we do know that the job market is weakening. You can't avoid a headline or a post about, challenges of finding work, people being made redundant, certainly like in the hospitality sector and the retail sector, a huge amount of jobs being slashed, but we've seen an increase in public sector hiring. That's offsetting some of the drops in employment. It's challenging because of the cost of employing, certainly on a temp basis, the cost of employing candidates, minimum wage being £11.44 or £12.21, including holiday pay, increases in national insurance. Then you have your markups. You've got your own inflation and your own internal operating costs. You have to then account for that. So there's going to be greater price pressure on clients. And when you're hiring for permanent, you've got wages currently outstripping inflation. You've got wages outstripping productivity as well, employee productivity. In the UK, productivity per worker is basically broadly flat. It's struggling to grow, but wages are outstripping inflation. So it's basically becoming more and more expensive to hire workers that just aren't any more productive than they were 5 years ago. Yeah. That's a challenge for hirers. Therefore, it's a challenge for recruiters to find, the better, more productive candidates, temp or perm, that can add value, particularly in the private sector. You've also got changes to, these aren't finalised yet, but you've got the proposed changes under the Employment Rights Bill and the Finance Bill. What's going on with the umbrella market. There's this introduction of joint and several liability. A lot of umbrella companies are shouting on LinkedIn and no doubt other social media platforms about the risks that clients and agencies now face about joint and several liability. I mean, my opinion on that is that rather than having a small PSL or one provider of a payroll company, pool your risk, have multiple payroll companies. And here's the interesting thing. A lot of agencies in our market extol the virtues of doing your own pay-as-you-earn internally. That's risky now, or will be if the legislation is as interpreted and that's what's finalised. I'd be worried if I was a school working with an agency, big or small, that does its own payroll, because the school is directly on the hook if they don't do the payroll properly and or go bust, and there's a huge pay-as-you-earn bill waiting for the candidates. I think this is really interesting because I think this affects like so many recruitment businesses. We just break that down just in like 2 minutes. Like what's the proposed change here, and what does it mean for? Well, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong out there, please, because I'm no expert. I'm no legal expert, and I'm not an expert on payroll. But from what I've read and as I understand it, the agency and or the client are joint and severally liable for any pay-as-you-earn or national insurance that isn't paid or correctly deducted. So if HMRC goes after the payroll company for unpaid pay-as-you-earn or incorrectly paid pay-as-you-earn, and they can't pay it for whatever reason, they liquidate the business, go bust, then the law will allow them just to come directly to the agency and say, right, you cough up, you owe us. Even if you've already paid over the gross, which included that, well, it hasn't been paid, you've got to pay it twice now. And if you're an agency doing your own internal pay-as-you-earn, paying the candidates directly, and you get it wrong, HMRC comes after you and you go bust or you've buggered off, the client, in our case, the school, they're on the hook for it. That's huge, huge risk. So the way I look at it is the easiest way to pull that risk is to have multiple payroll companies. Now, administratively, that's a burden, but the burden is less in terms of cost than the risk of relying on one outsourced payroll company. Because what you're doing is you're saying school, I don't know if you're getting this on the camera, but school, agency, payroll company, okay? Well, if it's just the school and the agency, then the school's at risk, okay? Might be a minimal risk, but it's still a risk that currently doesn't exist. You're just basically putting more risk in the supply chain. So the agency should, if you're doing a BD properly and so forth, and in my view, they should separate that client from the risk and therefore outsource their payroll. But don't use one provider.
Use multiple.
Yeah, because this is still a private company and you don't control it. You don't know what the owners of that payroll company are going to do. They might take £1 million worth of gross pay that week and bugger off to the Bahamas, or incorrectly calculate it deliberately, siphon off 20% and bugger off.
We've seen that happen previously, haven't
Right.
we? Yeah.
So what will happen then, even if they're doing it compliantly, whatever that means, then it would mean they've still not paid it correctly and or taken the cash, and they've denied HMRC revenue. So they'll come after you for it as an agency. So the best way to do it, if you're dealing with private companies, now you're at a higher risk, pool your risk and have multiple payroll companies. So I think gone are the days of umbrella companies trying to win a PSL and get be first on the PSL and perhaps incentivize that all or the majority of an agency's payroll through a rebate. Well, you can do that, but why would you put yourself at that much risk for the sake of a rebate when actually you're better off just pooling that risk?
Yeah.
That's my view on it. And that's going to be a huge change in the way that agencies engage with, some agencies, no doubt, in our market and others, a revenue generator is the rebate they get from their payroll company. Well, I think that's going to disappear. Why would you take that risk? And I think the idea of being internal pay as you earn is going to disappear, because schools will cotton on to the fact. They'll go, well, you're now putting us at risk. Schools will want to see how you mitigate and that risk and the due diligence you've done to prove that things have been done correctly, so they're not at risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and it'd be really interesting, because the new framework, the CCS framework, is up for renewal, and the team at the CCS are presenting for APSCO in October in London, and I'm really keen to see what they say about how the finance bill and how it's currently proposed to play out is going to factor into how you tender for and the success of being on that. I could be wrong, but will they score you down if you do your own payroll and or use one payroll company?
We'll see.
We will see.
Yeah. Alex, it's been a fascinating conversation. If anyone's listening to this, so part of your strategy, being out there, attract the best people. If people are listening, like, I want to work with that guy, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Contact me on LinkedIn. Send me a message. Happily give you my email address. We've even got a consultant offering document, which is a nice little PDF brochure, which tells you everything about our culture, how we operate as a business, our incentives, our progression, what we're all about, our people. Within reason, I'll happily meet any education recruitment consultant that's interested in working at Now Education or just wants to know more about what it's like at working at Now Education, because you never know what that leads to. And that goes to business leaders as well, and owners of recruitment businesses. If you want to reach out and talk to me and you own or run your own, manage a recruitment of all sizes, education recruitment businesses, I'd probably say, I'll happily take that invite and have a coffee, because it's always good to meet people. And can I just end on something?
Absolutely.
Something I really believe in is it's in terms of networking, is utilize the strength of weak ties. Have you heard that phrase before?
I've never heard that phrase before.
So most people, when you talk about networking, they'll think, use an example. Someone was looking for a job. They're probably, and I think incorrectly, or not their best strategy, go to someone they know very well. That's a strong tie in their own close network.
Yeah.
They're probably less likely to be able to get you what you want. I got into this job through a connection with my ex-girlfriend, who was personal trainer of a guy that was running and owning a recruitment business in Birmingham, who lived in Princethorpe whilst I was a teacher in Aldridge. She was the weak connection between our two networks, and I never knew him. But through that strength of weak connection, the opportunity to become the CEO of Now Education ultimately materializing, I am here today talking to you on this podcast.
I love that. I really like that. I think that's a really nice way to end. Alex, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you.